Joining us now is the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, Skye Perryman, and former federal prosecutor and senior writer for Politico magazine, Ankush Khardori. And we have Rennick, Skye's son, who's also in the studio. Maybe he'll make a guest appearance. But guys, I want to start with Steve Bannon's comments this week. We played it earlier in the 7 o'clock hour, but let's play it again and then open it up for debate.
Well, he's going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States.
So that was Bannon's interview with The Economist this week. You're both lawyers. What are the Russ vote ways potentially around the 22nd Amendment? Are there any? Is there a plan? Is there a potential for a plan? Ankush, you start, and then Skye, jump in whenever.
So there is no credible argument. I want to be very clear about this. It's a bunch of nonsense that we just heard, many layers of nonsense, including the notion that Trump, who is extraordinarily unpopular, would somehow be elected, even assuming he could get on the ballot. But the argument, one argument, might be that Trump could run as the vice president on a ticket and then be elevated to the presidency after he's in office or after his president and him ran for office if they're elected, because the 22nd Amendment only prevents someone from being elected the president three times, not necessarily serving as president 3 times. Now, I think that is a ridiculous argument. But Russ Vought and the conservative, well, I wouldn't even say conservative legal establishment, I would say the Trump legal establishment often offer crazy, unprecedented and unsupported legal arguments.
That they then follow through on.
That they then follow through on. But I want to be very clear. I don't want to suggest that I'm lending any sort of credence whatsoever to this theory.
Well, but this is sort of, to me, this reminds me of what Putin did in Russia. He was the president, then stepped back, Medvedev stepped in, and then Medvedev stepped back, and he went back to the presidency. Well, you know how he loves Putin.
Well, he does. And, you know, there's no credibility in what, under the Constitution, but the Constitution hasn't mattered to this president. The American people, unfortunately, haven't mattered to this president. And so I think the question is, why is Steve Bannon saying this now? And that is because this is another attempt to normalize things that are not normal, that are harmful to people, and that are unconstitutional. Why did they decimate the East Wing of the People's House this week? To normalize a notion of a person acting as a dictator, acting as a king, trying to exert power. And so what I think you see the American people saying in the millions of people that turned out last weekend, I think what we see is the American people saying, no, we're not going to allow you to normalize this. But that is why. Why are they doing that now? It is to start normalizing things that should not be normal, that are not normal, and that beyond that are harmful and unconstitutional.
And, you know, if Donald Trump runs as the vice president, maybe Barack Obama should run as somebody's vice president. Let's see how that shakes out. And he does the same thing as Trump. I don't know.
I think this ties into what Skye said, but I thought Molly Jong-Fast offered some useful thoughts on the subject a couple of days ago. She did not take this terribly seriously. She said Bannon says all sorts of things. But I do think that one point she made is particularly relevant. And she said, well, if there is this notion that Trump might serve a third term, it creates the appearance that he's not a lame duck.
Correct. That's a good point.
Right?
Very good point.
But that dovetails with your point about normalizing what the administration is doing and whether it will last more than a year or two.
But the problem with that is that feels right. Molly Jong-Fast seems right on that. However, what that tells his followers is that if he doesn't get a third term, some shenanigans happened. And then you have possibly another January 6th or something, some kind of violence, because they've proven with January 6th that they're not scared to not do that.
And it's an attempt, again, to try to undermine what people have confidence in this country. Our Constitution, our elections. We at Democracy Forward have had to file a lawsuit because they're trying to collect individual Americans' data from across the federal government and use it to purge voters from the rolls, right? I mean, this is what's happening right now in 2025. And I think you see the signaling is to try to start normalizing and creating a reality that should not exist.
Y'all stay in court. Y'all had a...
And we're winning in court.